Hi, let's talk a bit about program management. As you probably realize, given the kind of work that we do at Chalmers Street, we're doing a lot of project management. The execution of the new processes, the new ideas that we drive is absolutely critical. Believe sometimes, too often, people will underestimate the amount of effort and activities required for good execution, for good project management. I wanted to use a little time here and help explain some of the things that I think are most important. What you're going to see is a slide deck that we use when we teach our green belts, because we're always telling our green belts, hey, it's great to know the answer, but it doesn't until you get it in place and people are actually following the new process. So this is our greenbelt training deck, and there's just a few things I want to highlight that I think are really important when we're doing project management. Now, I will say I'm not PMI certified, but I've been implementing projects for 25 years. I've seen a lot. I've seen different scales from very small projects to projects that impact thousands of people. And one of the things, like straight off the bat, is in scope and objectives, the initiation of the project. Uh, what I see missing is a clear future state or to be state that can be used to go and build the project plan. So if you're a project manager or you're setting a project manager off to go do their work and it's not clear and documented what that future new program or product or tool or process, how that integrates inside of the organization, they'll never be able to put together a good work breakdown structure. And so that's right there, the very first thing, that initiation and then planning. And I'll talk about work breakdown structure in a minute. And then execution. And I'll kind of touch on a few things in execution. My purpose of this video is not to go through all of these, but really just to kind of hit some of the main areas where I see mistakes happen. So let's say you have a really strong objective, you have a good scope, and you know what that future state looks like, and you understand what let's say, what the big things are that have to happen in order to get your new process or your new software or whatever it is in place. You have to think about how you break that down into consumable pieces. And I see more often, I would say, I see very large chunks like, hey, we need to train the call center. Okay. What does that really mean, though? We have to develop training. What are we training them on? So we need some kind of training objective. We need to understand the timing of that training. How are we going to schedule it? We need to come up with who is going to be responsible for delivering the training and when is that going to happen? And all of these things, right, need to be clear. And so it's not just, hey, we need to train the call center. It's these are the different activities that are required to perform training, to have an output of trained people. And here's the timeline, and potentially here's the dependencies that need to occur in order to do it. I like to think of the work breakdown structure in terms of, 3 to 5 day consumable chunks. And it does depend on the project. There's projects where I've said, I'm going to break it down into, 1 to 2 week chunks. But if you have work that's broken down and it takes a month to complete that piece of work, the breakdown structure, right? That is that is definitely opening up yourself to potential failure. So there's a little bit of science and a little bit of art to work breakdown structure, but certainly after you have clarity in that vision, the next really important piece, and that where I see people getting things wrong, is having a clear work breakdown structure. Now, what are some of the things that you're going to have to do in order to build that? Well, we've already talked about the objectives and scope. I've kind of talked about work breakdown structure in terms of chunks. It's helpful to kind of think of them in major deliverable chunks and then look at those major deliverables. Like training the call center would be a major deliverable, but then what are those sub chunks? And that's what I was describing a few minutes ago. What is the order to those sub chunks? And look, we don't always put dependencies on our project plans. Sometimes our projects are 2 months long or a month long, and we don't want to spend more time building a project plan than it does to execute the project. Nonetheless, priority that we should think about, and that requires us to organize that inside of our tool. Additionally, who's responsible? Maybe this is the most important of all, is understanding in your project, and we talk about this in Greenbelt at the very beginning when you're writing your charter, who needs to be involved. Now, once we're at this point where we're executing, the question isn't so much who needs to be involved, it's what do they need to do? And do they know how to do it? And are they aware of what the date and what the expectation is for them to get that done? So resources and responsibilities is absolutely crucial to include inside of that project management plan. And I'll show you kind of an example of a view of how we do our project management. But just realize that usually there's multiple artifacts inside of a project. There'll be, the Gantt chart. There'll be potentially a stakeholder list. There'll be a risk log, something like that. That is all part of the project plan, and understanding who's who inside of that might be one of those pieces, and it may be included in one of the other artifacts as well. And then from there, it's really refining and making sure everyone understands the language inside of that project plan, so that you can ensure that the team as a whole has a common understanding of what needs to get done. And now we're all rowing in the same direction. It's an alignment tool, right? A lot of this is alignment. And if I get a strong project plan and I get a team aligned, that's going to be, 80% of what I need for success. I just wanted to jump to, so these are some of the things that you would see in a typical project plan that Chalmers Street would do is, the task. I like, and again, we don't always do this, but I like when we talk about the task in terms of its duration and start date, and just calculate the end date off of that. Why do I like that? Because it forces us to think, how long is this going to take? And look across and go, this says 8 days, but I don't know. It might actually be 15. And gosh, you know what? If it's 21 days, maybe I should break it down into something smaller. So that's, I think, a very powerful component of looking at, or value, I would say, of looking at the project plan this way. Like I said, we don't always do dependencies. We always do resources, and those resources understand that this is the date and this is the thing that I'm responsible for. And then we like to produce a picture. Now, I've heard, and this is another mistake I think people make, I've heard executives go, oh my gosh, we put something like this in front of them and go, oh my gosh, this is too much information. I can't consume it all. And so the project lead will sometimes go back and go, okay, I'll simplify it. And they get rid of this wonderful detail that they put together. That is a mistake. All the executive is saying is, this is too much for me to consume. Give me something, brief that is more consumable. Maybe a simple timeline chart and a progress report so we can keep the executive up to date. The reality is, and this is painful for a project manager, the reality is you're going to have to capture multiple levels of documentation. You're going to need the documentation that you use to manage the project, and you're going to need the documentation that you use to communicate the project. And in the end, the project is going to be more successful. So the work that we do up front, we get back in the end. So that's actually all I wanted to really cover. There's actually a ton more here around, responsibilities, risk management, and of course, anyone out there that is PMI certified knows that this is certainly a whole set of courses that you can create some, your discipline around. But I'd like to hear some best practices from you. What are some of the things that are really valuable from your project management experience? And what are some of the things, give me maybe a mistake you'd be willing to share from your early experiences that you really learned from and that other people should know about so they don't make that same mistake. Put your comments in the post. Thanks a lot.